Last weekend, I decided to go on one of my solo adventures along the Buffalo River near Linden. I'm pretty into this kind of thing. Just me, my canoe, the wilderness, and maybe a campfire to wrap up the day. It's kind of my way to escape the noise of the modern world and enjoy some peace and quiet. So, I set up camp and got a nice fire going. After a long day, there's nothing better than sitting by the fire with a warm meal. It was probably around 9 p.m. when I finished eating. I'd put my drinks in the river to keep them cool, so I walked over to the edge to grab one. As I approached, I heard this big splash, like something being tossed into the water, but just shrugged it off, thinking maybe it was a fish or something. But I kept walking, and suddenly, splash. I see this rock, probably the size of a small melon, flying through the air and crashing into the water about 10 yards away from me. That definitely grabbed my attention. Immediately, every hair on my body stood up. I froze and grabbed my flashlight. I scanned the area and caught a glimpse of a pair of eyes. Just as soon as I saw them, they vanished into the darkness. Now, I'm thinking maybe some prankster is out here trying to mess with me, so I fired a round from my pistol into the air to scare them off. But nothing. It was dead silent, and it struck me how unlikely it was for anyone else to be out here, especially on a weeknight. I packed up my camp in record time and headed home. I didn't want to stick around to find out who or what was out there. The intrigue didn't leave me, though. The very next morning, I went back. I had to know if what I saw was real or just my mind playing tricks. As I looked around, I heard some rustling in the brush nearby, then a pattern of 3 knocks, clear as day. I picked up a piece of driftwood and knocked back in the same pattern. This back and forth went on for a good 5 minutes. It was such a strange experience, like some kind of conversation. When I heard a car approaching, I stopped. Truth be told, I didn't want anyone to see me communicating with the wilderness. Didn't want folks thinking I'd lost my mind. I went back home, but the curiosity remained. 4 days later, my curiosity got the better of me, and I returned. I walked around, scanning every inch of the area, and there it was, a footprint. The track was huge, about 4 to 5 inches longer than my foot, and I wear a size 12 shoe. I just stood there, staring at it, trying to wrap my head around what or who could have left it. That footprint sealed it for me. Whatever it was real. There's something out there by the Buffalo River, and I'm not sure what to think. It's left me with an unsolved mystery and an exciting story to tell, one that still gives me chills whenever I think about it. On Saturday, September 27th, in Bellingham, Washington, I decided to head over to Lake Terrell for a day of pheasant hunting. It was a pretty successful outing, and I came back home with 2 nice roosters. My house has this small clearing to the right of the driveway where the septic tank is buried. That's where I usually clean my birds, just about 20 feet from Haxton Road, right at the edge of the woods. I'd set up a pine log there as my cleaning spot, and whenever I wrapped up, I'd toss the guts and feathers into the woods. The raccoons and opossums took care of the rest. It was around noon when I got back from my hunt. I walked over to the clearing to start cleaning the birds. I'd just finished with the first one when, all of a sudden, absolute chaos erupted in the woods right in front of me. About 20 feet away, this big tree started swinging like crazy from side to side. I'd say the trunk was maybe 10 inches thick, and something powerful was making it sway like it was just a twig. Leaves and branches started falling everywhere, not just from that tree, but from others as well that were getting slapped around. Whatever was shaking that tree took a brief pause, and that's when I heard this loud cracking sound, like if someone was snapping branches over their knee, or maybe smashing them against the ground. My heart raced as I leapt to my feet, knife in hand. I had no clue what was about to happen next, but I braced myself for something to jump out of the brush. Despite all this action going down so close to me, I couldn't see a thing because of the thick brush and foliage. My dog, Robin, a Labrador retriever, was there with me. He'd been chewing on a pheasant wing, but quickly sprang up, eyes locked on the woods. He didn't growl or bark, but he started inching backward toward the house, all cautious like. There was a moment of silence, and then, bam, the tree started shaking again, even more violently. More limbs crashed to the ground, and that cracking noise picked up again. Right then, I knew my little skinning knife wasn't going to do much against whatever was out there. Deciding it was better to be safe than sorry, I gathered up my half-cleaned birds and made a fast retreat back to the house. I couldn't stop thinking about what happened. I'd never seen anything like it before, and whatever it was a force to be reckoned with. That day, I learned my lesson. Sometimes, when the wild decides to remind you of its power, it's best just to give it some space. My encounter occurred on the 4th of July in 1995 in Ohio. I was in the Army at the time, and I was home on leave. My cousin, a friend, and I had just watched the Independence Day fireworks and decided to go for a night hike along the railroad tracks near Riverview Road, close to Brandywine Ski Resort. We had done this hike many times before, along different parts of the road without any problems. That night, we parked in a public lot at the corner of Riverview and Vaughan Road and started heading north along the Cuyahoga Valley Line tracks. It was around 11:30 p.m. The sky was clear and the moon was shining brightly. We had walked about a quarter mile when we suddenly heard a high-pitched scream coming from the west across Riverview Road. It sounded a bit like a coyote or a peacock, but it was raspier and lasted about 5 seconds without changing pitch. At first, we brushed it off as just some animal and kept walking. As we continued down the tracks, we came to a clearing with a swampy area to the west, between the tracks and the road, and tall weeds and trees on the east side. We could see beavers swimming in the swamp and hear the usual summer insects and frogs. We went a little further into a more wooded area where some railroad cars and equipment were parked and explored for a few minutes before deciding to head back. As we were leaving the clearing on our way back, we were chatting when suddenly a very powerful, angry roar erupted from the middle of the swamp. It was again higher in pitch than you'd expect from a typical roar, and this time it lasted much longer, about 8 to 10 seconds, and it sounded really close, maybe 50 to 75 feet away. We froze, barely able to say, "What the heck was that?" Right then, a huge creature charged at us through the swamp. We could only see its silhouette, but it was definitely upright on two legs, swinging its arms and moving its massive body through the water. It was making waves and moving super fast for something chest deep in muck and water. We didn't wait to find out more. We sprinted back to our car, casting glances back to see if it was following. We could see the silhouette at the edge of the swamp, but it didn't venture onto the tracks. This happened over 11 years ago, but it feels like it was just yesterday. I'm convinced it wasn't some kind of prank, considering the sheer size of the creature and the powerful way it moved through water. And that scream, it's unforgettable. I still live in the area, Richfield, and I drive through that spot regularly. I haven't seen or heard anything like it since, but it still gives me goosebumps whenever I pass by. My wife thinks I'm crazy. A group of high school friends from Houma, Louisiana, had a camping trip they'll never forget in Kisatchie National Forest. They had just graduated and decided to celebrate with an outdoor adventure, heading about 100 miles northwest of Baton Rouge. Things took a spooky turn when they were relaxing at their campsite, about a mile and a half from Backbone Trail. At around 9:20 p.m. on June 28th, they heard a strange growl and saw something with glowing eyes. Whatever it was, It stood around 5 feet tall, and it freaked them out so much that one of the teens, in their late teens, immediately called 911. Sheriff's deputies showed up and searched the area. They kept their eyes peeled for any strange creatures while they made their way to the campsite. They found the teenagers scared but safe, and then helped them out of the forest. The officers checked things out thoroughly, but didn't find any signs of the creature the teens described. In the end, they congratulated the friends on graduating and wished them all the best for their futures. Interestingly, this wasn't the first time someone claimed to see Bigfoot in the Kisatchie National Forest. Back in 2019, two guys going by the names Texlaw and Claude said they had some proof of Bigfoot's existence. They set up hidden cameras and audio devices to catch evidence in the 600,000-acre forest, even managing to record some loud howls. These researchers claimed to have found footprints and other signs like twisted tree limbs, suggesting Bigfoot's presence. As Texlaw put it, "It is what it is. If you choose to believe, that's great. If you choose not to believe, that's great too."